Hello, I'm Bill McIntosh with Peregrine Communications in London. In this edition of the Peregrine podcast, I'm joined by Greg Zuckerman, special writer with the Wall Street Journal. He's a three-time winner of the prestigious Gerald Loeb Award for Business Reporting and has authored several books, including The Greatest Trade Ever, which chronicles John Paulson's shorting of the U.S. housing market in 2008. And today, we're going to discuss Greg's New York Times and Sunday Times bestseller, The Man Who Solved the Market, how Jim Simons launched the Quant Revolution, published by Penguin Books in 2019. We agreed to discuss the book earlier this year before Mr. Simons unhappily died, aged 86, in early May. The Man Who Solved the Market is a fascinating, meticulously researched, compelling read. It tracks the path of trial, error, and discovery that makes Simons' firm, Renaissance Technologies, the most consistent moneymaker in the history of investment management. Greg's painstaking research conveys huge lessons on how quant investing developed, and this makes the book both profoundly insightful as well as a must-read for people in asset management or anyone hoping to develop a career in the field. The subtitle of the book, How Jim Simons Launched Quant Revolution, really captures how quantitative processes and computing power have remade investment firms in recent decades. It also points to how Simons, an unlikely investment revolutionary, surpassed the returns earned by celebrated investment gurus like Warren Buffett, George Soros, and Peter Lynch. Welcome, Greg, and thank you for joining me.
Great to be here.
First off, what made you decide to write the book?
So I've been writing about finance. I've been writing about investors, Wall Street, hedge funds since 1996, at least at the Wall Street Journal, and a few years earlier at some other smaller publications. And you keep hearing about Jim Simons, about Renaissance, about Medallion Fund, and how it outperformed everybody. And it was sort of secretive, not just sort of, the most secretive firm out there, the most successful firm out there, and the most intriguing firm out there. So it was sort of my great white whale kind of thing. Always wanted to write a book about them. I approached Jim years ago about writing a book, and people said, nah, he's not going to work with you, Greg. But at some point I said, this book needs to be written, whether he cooperates or not. And I just kind of threw myself into it.
Yeah, well, it's certainly right that it needed to be made because he's such an influential figure. And of course, your book shows that in spades. So what reception has the book had?
It's done nicely. Thankfully, people seem to still read it. I think because, and I only realized it after I finished the book, it's as much a management book as it is an investment book. Yes, it's about how he is the greatest and his firm are the greatest quants ever. They really led this revolution. And forget just quantitative finance. They were doing AI in the 1980s. They were doing machine learning before anyone else was doing it. They were pioneers in so many different things. Predictive algorithms. They changed our country, frankly, because they made so much money that they started getting involved in politics. Bob Mercer, who was the co-CEO for a while, I would argue is the most important reason why Donald Trump won the election in 2016. So there's real reason why people have an interest in these individuals on the trading side and their impact on society, but they're also management marvels, especially Jim, his ability to attract talent and to get them to work together. I think there are all kinds of lessons there. So I think those are part of the reasons why people seem to keep reading the book and enjoy it.
In the end, did you get any cooperation from Jim?
I did. So he was kind enough to sit with me, to talk to me for a good 20 hours, maybe 10 sessions, 2 hours each, in which I sat with him in his office across from him and just had to deal with his smoking. He was a chain smoker for most of his 80 plus years, and he died at 86. And he had a robust life, a healthy life until the end. So I'm not sure what the lesson there is. He was a drinker. I wouldn't say he was excessive, but he liked his drinks. He was an interesting guy who enjoyed life. So I sat with him and I talked to him, and Jim was careful not to give away too many of the secrets of the firm, but he gave me enough. So I was very grateful.
No, indeed. He sounds like a very interesting character and certainly someone worth talking to for all those hours, as you mentioned. I mean, we know that Jim excelled early on at math. He got a PhD from UC Berkeley at the age of 23, and then he worked as a code breaker at the Institute for Defense Analyses, or the IDA as it's called. I mean, what is it about the IDA, in your opinion, that shaped his thinking to eventually embrace statistical arbitrage research into market pricing and forecasting?
Yeah, so as you suggest, he was an academic. He was a mathematician. He's a geometer in particular, and his math goes down in the world of mathematics as one of the greats. He would be worthy of a book just on his successes in the world of mathematics. He's got theorems and work that is still cited in that world. It's among the reasons why people were so disappointed when he left it all to go trade. But then, as you suggest, he left academia to go work for a quasi-government agency in Princeton that was breaking code, that was going up against the Russians in the Cold War. And I believe that there he learned two different things. One was how to build predictive algorithms. That's what they were doing and trying to break code. And that taught him later on. He was a quant. That's what you do. You build algorithms. But it also taught him how really super smart, quirky, idiosyncratic characters can work together. And that's what they did at the IDA. They were some of the smartest brains in the country with a common cause going up against the Russians. And I think he noticed that. He saw how people can work together. And later on, what Renaissance was about, getting the smartest people in the industry, in the world, mathematicians, scientists, to somehow work together and not in competition, which is pretty much one of the secret sauces of Renaissance, how they get people to work together. Again, going back to that point that they're a management marvel, and that's part of the underappreciated reason why they're so good.
No, indeed. And the first investment company, Money Metrics, was obviously based in the small shopping mall in Seneca, Long Island. And I think it's fair to say there were probably more setbacks than successes. But Jim had something about him that drove him to keep going, but also, as you mentioned, to inspire his largely academic team to keep trying. What do you think that was?
He wanted to get rich. He wanted to get super rich. He's a fascinating guy because he is a combination of a lot of different things, a lot of different traits. He wants to help society, or when he was alive, he was very philanthropic. Autism research, I don't think anyone's given more money to autism research. He subsidized teachers, mathematics teachers in the public schools in New York. So he's got that philanthropic side and the mathematics side, as I said earlier, but he also really had this deep desire to get really rich. And that kept him going. And as you suggest, they had a lot of obstacles. As a writer, you worry a little bit going into a project, especially this one. They're the greatest hedge fund in history. They're the greatest investment team we've ever seen in modern times. Their track record, their consistency, how few times they've lost money. It's crazy. So given all that, I was a little worried as a writer. Well, what are the obstacles? What's the drama here? They just kind of figured out some algorithms early on and been taking advantage of them. And then what I learned was, no, there was so much drama. It was rich with drama. And a lot of it was Jim figuring out the best approach to investing. He went back and forth, and he wasn't a quant early on. He traded like most everybody else. And he literally couldn't take it. His stomach, his ulcers, he had problems, the ups and downs of the market. And he said, no, I got to figure out a way to turn the decisions over to the machines. Again, so early. We're talking in the 80s, he made his decision when people weren't talking about AI and algorithms governing our lives like they are today. So Jim figured out a system, but he had a lot of help, his people around him. And the book is half about Jim, but it's about so many others that made huge, enormous contributions as well.
No, the book draws those individual stories out extremely well and shows just how much drama there was within the firm over so many years. But out of all the leaders and talented quants who passed through Renaissance, whose contribution do you think was the most pivotal? You've mentioned Robert Mercer. Is it him, or is it him and some others?
He and Peter Brown, who currently runs the firm, they are responsible, or most responsible, I should say, for succeeding in equities. So basically, from 1978, when Jim started this firm, to 1992, they struggled. They went back and forth. They kept working at it. They were resilient and persistent. And finally, by 1992, they had it figured out they developed a system, an automated, often automated, not always, but a quantitative approach to making a lot of money in fixed income investments, bonds, commodities, currencies, but they couldn't figure out equities. And then you and I would say, well, or I can't speak for you, I would say, all right, fine. I'm rich. I'm making money on other kinds of things. Can't figure out equities, big deal. But again, Jim Simons didn't want to just be rich. He wanted to be super rich. So you can't do that unless you develop a firm that can make a lot of money on the equity side. There you can really grow it. You can manage a lot more money, and the equity market is much deeper. And he recruited, or some other people helped recruit, some really fascinating individuals from IBM, including Bob Mercer, including Peter Brown. And they helped figure out equity. So I'm going to give them a lot of credit there. And it took them a number of years, but sort of like by the mid 90s, late 90s, they had that figured out. And as people will read in the book, A lot of it, they had good fortune too. There was a guy there named David Magerman who realized they were making mistakes and it wasn't working and something was off. And Bob Mercer, his boss, had made a mistake in building the system, the formula. They had a figure that wasn't updating. It was like an S&P 500 number that wasn't updating like it should have been, and it was static. And he's like, boss, I think this number needs to be updating. And Bob Mercer, to his credit, says, you're right, I was wrong. And then they changed his history. So there were a lot of people that played an important role.
No, indeed. So obviously, Renaissance became so successful that it began to attract huge attention from competitors about firms, trades, and research technique. Is it realistic today that Renaissance can stay one step ahead indefinitely?
It's a great question. As a cynical or skeptical journalist, I keep waiting for them to drop the ball and to see the returns slow. They've slowed a little bit, but they're still quite good. And we're talking the Medallion Fund. They raised money for these outside funds that other investors can get into. Medallion is really just Renaissance and a few friends and family. They're not even really, it's really mostly employees. So these other outside funds haven't done so well, but Medallion continues to kill it. And yeah, you would think people would be catching up. I think part of the reason is they don't have the same advantage that used to have in things like collecting data. They used to have much better data, market data going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And they were at the forefront or just before anybody else and collecting it all and seeing the importance of this data revolution, getting
Absolutely, yeah.
Alternative data. There's some data source. They've found it already and they've purchased it and they've tested it. So whatever you can think of, they have already. Because they have guys and women just thinking all day, what new data can we purchase? So some of their advantages aren't there anymore, but they do have a bit of advantage in talent. And yes, because I'm like you, I go around, I go to Wall Street firms and they say, well, Greg, over there are our PhDs. Look in that corner over there. We've got a couple of two PhDs. Renaissance is got hundreds of PhDs, and they're not just PhDs. These are people who led departments, led mathematics departments, led physics departments, led all kinds of areas of science and mathematics at Stanford and places like that. So they still do have much better talent than most everybody else.
No, indeed. And I think everyone has increasingly come to realize in the last 10 or 15 years, talent really drives these things. And we're seeing that with, the big multi-strat firms now. But turning back to the book, it not only explores how Renaissance evolved into the world's most important quant investing hub, but it also documents the impact that Simons had on liberal politics in the US and that Mercer had on conservative politics in both the US and Britain with Brexit. And I know that you've touched on this, but I guess I'd like to drill down a bit in the sense of how do you think that two men of such profoundly different political outlooks were able to work successfully together for so many years?
It's a fascinating thing. It's kind of confounding. Jim Simons was among the biggest Democratic donors out there for many years. Backed Hillary, backed Joe Biden, backed most everybody. He backs different liberal causes. His kids do too. And the co-CEO of the firm for many years, Bob Mercer, was among Donald Trump's biggest backers in 2016. Rebecca Mercer, people could remember, his daughter played a huge important role. The reason I say he probably wouldn't have been elected were it not for Bob Mercer is because when the Trump campaign was struggling in the summer of 2016, on the heels of that video that came out where he said some disparaging things about women and such, Bob Mercer went to Donald Trump and said, you've got to put two people in your campaign, Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway. And like them or hate them, they turned that campaign around. So I give credit to Bob Mercer for that. So how did they work together? It was tense at times, but Jim Simons liked Bob Mercer personally. And there's some lesson there that we can disagree with each other's politics and still work together and be friends with each other. And again, it also helped that Jim Simons loved money. So Bob Mercer was helping him make a lot of money. So that added more reason why they should get along.
And I guess they were both pretty preeminent scientists and mathematicians, so the respect for each other's skills in that area must have helped draw them together as well.
Yes, very much so.
Well, with Jim gone now, what's happening with Renaissance? And is there a game plan that you're aware of for the next few years, 5 years and beyond?
So today, Peter Brown runs the firm. I write about him in the book. He played important roles the whole way through the last couple of decades and has done a good job running that firm. He's going to pass the baton on soon as well. He's getting up there. The guy is obsessive about returns and about work. He will sleep in his office frequently, even. He's in his 60s now, maybe in 70s, frankly. So he is a perfect person to lead the firm, but also he is a scientist. He's a guy who believes even more so than Jim and turning the decisions over to machines. And it's something I've come to appreciate. We humans make all kinds of mistakes. And the best kinds of companies, I believe, are those that are man plus machine, which is what Renaissance is. They're not all machine. They haven't turned every decision over. It's not all automated, but it is man plus machine, or even really machine plus man. And the checklists that are really important in all kinds of areas in society, pilots and surgeons and such, a systematized approach. I've really become a believer in that. And Renaissance has been doing that for years. And Peter Brown, who runs the firm, is among the biggest advocates, even more so than Jim. So he's a perfect person to keep leading things. So they're in good position. They're in good hands right there. As you suggest, they've got more competition than ever in the world of quantitative finance. Most everybody, it has some quant element to them on Wall Street today. You don't have the old school traders who are doing it all on instinct and intuition and judgment and winging it kind of thing, street smart kind of trader type. You don't have that anymore. So you would think the returns would start slowing, and I keep waiting for that.
No, you're right. It's a whole new era for sure that's happened, within your and my lifetime.
Yeah,
yeah. Discretionary trading, which used to dominate, has been pretty much totally overwhelmed by quants. Turning this back to philanthropy, which you mentioned a few moments ago, I think this is one area where Jim's legacy will continue to make an impact. I mean, just last year, he gave $500 million to Stony Brook University. And are you aware of any plans they have in perpetuity for his legacy to continue through philanthropy?
Yeah, so his children were very involved at the end and will now be running things. And I don't think they're going to be as involved in politics. It's a good question. I think they may be, but I don't believe they're going to be as involved in politics as Jim was in terms of backing various candidates. And they care more about some other kinds of things. The environment. I know one of his children is very focused on that and spending a lot of money there. So the priorities are going to shift a little bit, but I still think autism research and helping teachers, subsidizing their salaries so they don't leave for private industry for places like Renaissance. That'll continue as well.
It's a fantastic legacy, especially the funding of math teachers to broaden young kids' ability to have access to that top talent. Very important indeed. Turning the page, what are you working on now, Greg?
I'm working on a new project, which is trading oriented and investing oriented. And it's about some of the greatest traders and investors in history and some of the greatest trades and investments and the drama behind the scenes. Right now, I'm very, very involved in 1987 and the crash of 1987 and people like Soros and Druckenmiller and Paul Tudor Jones and how they dealt with it and the mistakes they made, the successes, the lessons, and there's so many life lessons even and drama there. So my head is really very much focused right now. And right now I'm up to August or September of 1987, right before the crash. So that book hopefully be out. It's going to be about lots of different periods in markets and in investing over the past couple of decades. So that book hopefully be out in the next couple of years.
Wow, that's going to be an interesting read for sure. Well, just turning to asset management generally, asset managers get bigger and bigger. And as they do, they can devote more resources to sales and marketing, guarding their moats, and attracting new customers to obviously get bigger still. Do you think that with artificial intelligence and decentralized finance, that some of the giants that are out there could be overthrown? And is there anything that you think a future revolution, say in 2030 or so, in asset management might look like?
It's a good question. So far, there haven't been good examples of people, firms turning the decisions over completely to AI, to machine learning, to some automated system. People talk about it, theorize about it, pursue it. There haven't been good examples. And frankly, Wall Street, guys like Jim Simons in Renaissance, have been way ahead of broader society in adopting AI. So if they haven't figured out a way to kind of completely automate it, then you would wonder if broader society will be able to do so. There'll be some tasks that I think you can completely automate, but maybe one of the lessons of Renaissance is that it's hard to completely automate much of what we do in life. And instead, there'll be this man plus machine sort of dynamic in the future.
No, I think that's a perfectly good way to look at it, and I share that perspective. So one more question, if I may. Looking at hedge funds, is there anything you see looking into 2025 that interests you as a journalist and that might be of interest to the broader investing public?
So I've been writing about hedge funds off and on since 1996 at the Wall Street Journal, really more like sort of 2000. It's a long time. And I guess one of the lessons I've learned is just how overrated they are and how sad it is. So much money is managed by them, and managers do so well and charge so much and provide so little value on a relative basis. I don't mean to insult your clients or you for that matter. I apologize. And there are exceptions, and I've written books about those exceptions clearly. But as an industry, wow. I mean, my 60/40 Vanguard fund has outperformed since the 90s, the returns of hedge funds. And I understand there are arguments and Sharpe ratios and such, and not everyone can take downturns. But shouldn't the long-term investor, the pension fund, the endowment, the sovereign wealth fund be able to handle better than Greg Zuckerman the ups and downs in the market? So why should they care more about Sharpe ratios than the individual investor? I'm not sure. But yeah, I find it kind of sad. And I devoted so much of my life to writing about these guys. I almost blame myself, frankly, for promoting them, glorifying them to some extent. I write critically as well, but there's a lot of drama. They're interesting people often. They're not as interesting as they used to be because they don't make kind of big bets that I like to write about in trades. So there's so much talent in this industry that probably too much talent. They could have been doing other things like curing cancer, some of these super smart people, but they've done very nicely. Their investors, their clients, not as much.
No, I think they're an interesting feature that has become, much, much, much bigger over the last sort of 25 or 30 years. When you started out covering hedge funds, they were just a small wrinkle at the side of the investment management industry. And now they're still relatively small relative to the giants like BlackRock and others, but they have much more of the spotlight, and the interest in them is much greater.
Yes. Well, they're the most interesting people and charismatic and smart, and they do things that have impact. I just wrote this week about a hedge fund manager who's putting pressure on CVS, the big US drugstore chain, and they own all kinds of other things now in the healthcare world as well. So, and the hedge fund is trying to affect change. So, yeah, they play an outsized role in society and clearly in markets, yeah, in the economy.
Yeah, and I suppose that's likely to continue for a while yet,
Yeah.
despite how indexation continues to push all before it and gather more and more and more assets. But that'll be a topic for another time. Uh, Thanks, Greg. Our guest today has been Greg Zuckerman, special writer with the Wall Street Journal and author of The Man Who Solved the Market, How Jim Simons Launched the Quant Revolution, published by Penguin. It's available on Amazon and in all good bookstores. This brings to a close a truly fascinating and insightful edition of the Peregrine podcast. Thanks very much for listening.